What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. This episode is our preview of the AFC South division ahead of the 2024 NFL season, a division that has been very weird since Peyton Manning, the third best quarterback of all time, left it, and may continue to be weird this season. Matt and I are going to discuss that on this episode. This episode comes out Friday, August 23rd. Matt and I will be back on Tuesday, August 27th with our preview of the NFC West division. And then next Friday, August 30th, we're going to wrap up our divisional previews with the AFC West. There are only 3 more divisional previews to go, including this episode, and that means that football is right around the corner. Matt and I will be back week 1 of the NFL season with our picks pod, where we're going to give you our wild card teams to go along with our division winners that we picked in these previews, along with award winners, and then some of our favorite bets for the season. And then every week this year, we're going to be giving you bets for Thursday Night Football, along with one bet for the weekend. So you're going to want to check out those episodes. Before we get started, just a reminder, you can reach out to me and Matt, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. Really appreciate you guys listening. We would love to hear from you. As part of these divisional previews, Matt and I are giving bold predictions and hot takes for every division in the NFL, and we would love to hear yours. Make sure you send those in, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. But for now, let's grab Matt and let's talk about the AFC South. Let's go. All right, Matt is here, rolling on a Friday. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
Good. How are you?
I am fantastic. I'm ready to preview the AFC South. After this podcast, we will have completed 6 of the 8 divisional previews, meaning that football is right around the corner. This podcast is coming out on August 23rd, which we mentioned is a Friday. August 24th is week 0 of the college football season. Florida State plays Georgia Tech in Ireland. Get your first look at Mike Norvell's team coming back this year after missing the playoffs last year after going undefeated, which is a horrific fate. And old friend of the pod and quarterback who seems like he's been in college forever, DJ Uyunglele, is now quarterbacking the Florida State Seminoles, his third team. Which is absolutely insane to think about. If you think about college football when we were growing up, and then think about the fact that like DJU has quarterbacked Clemson, Oregon State, and now Florida State in his career, after being like a 5-star prospect and being like, this guy is like legit and is the future.
Yeah.
And now it's like,
Well,
is he going to be in the NFL? I don't know.
He and Bryce Young were coming into college at like the exact same time.
Yeah.
They were
And
like high school rivals.
we just talked on the NFC South preview that dropped on Tuesday this week about Bryce Young is now already in need of career resurrection after being in the NFL. And DJU's just living life, man, getting paid that sweet, sweet NIL money to quarterback a new team every single year. SMU in Nevada and Montana State and New Mexico are also on Saturday. And it's like, none of those games are going to be good. I don't really expect Florida State versus Georgia Tech to be good. Florida State's an 11-point favorite right now. But God damn it, it's real football. It's real football that matters, and I'm here for it. Really, what we're here to do today is preview the AFC South for the upcoming NFL season, starting with our biggest narratives. And since it is an AFC podcast, I get to lead off. My biggest narrative for the AFC South this year is, how big of a step can CJ Stroud take? So CJ took the league by storm last year, having one of the best rookie seasons of all time. He finished with a 9-6 record while completing 64% of his passes for 4,108 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. The Texans go 10-7, win a playoff game against Cleveland, 45-14, which, if you listen to this podcast last year, Matt and I were absolutely pounding the table for you to go bet on the Houston Texans. I think it was our best gambling call of the entire season. And we're going to actually be making a lot more gambling calls this year, giving out picks on the pod every week instead of just in the playoffs. But CJ was awesome in that game, 16 of 21, 274, 3 touchdowns. But then they go and play the Ravens in the divisional round and get absolutely schmeckledorfed 34-10. CJ goes 19 of 33 for 175 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. A lot of times when we talk about progression in sports, fans kind of expect linear progression. They're like, he was this good last year, or he was this good last year, so he should be better this year, and then better the next year, and then better the next year. And they just expect guys to kind of go in this straight line and get better every year. But we know that that's not really what progression looks like in any field, and especially not in the NFL. So I'm not saying that CJ is going to take a step back this year, but I look at the Texans roster and I look at the coaching staff and the team and kind of think like people expect this team to be a contender. And I don't really see it unless CJ Stroud takes a massive step forward and is able to be like a top 7 quarterback. You know, I think people would probably say he was top 15, 12, 10, like wherever you put him last season. I think there's a very clear tier of who the best quarterbacks in the league are. And unless he breaks that tier, the Houston Texans are not a Super Bowl contender this season.
A fair question to ask based on what we saw last year. It's like, honestly, how much room for growth is there really? Right? I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people who will debate it, but if you and I sat here and made our top 10 quarterbacks based off of what we saw last year, I think we would both probably have a hard time keeping him out of our top 10.
I think we did that exercise and I had him 9 or 10. Like I have him right on the borderline to being a top 10 guy.
Yeah. So, like, not only is there not that much farther up for him to go, but so much of like jumping up into that next tier of quarterbacks is such a higher degree of difficulty. And much of that comes from spending years in the NFL.
My big question with him is like, do you have the off script playmaking and like all of the different kind of like mobility and throws on the run and like some of these things that the guys ahead of you do have?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because we're talking about guys ahead of him, it's like, you know, top guys like Mahomes and Allen and Burrow and Lamar Jackson. Like, he's not going to be better than those guys this season, I don't think.
Yeah.
If he is better than some of those guys, then the Texans are for sure a Super Bowl contender. But I look at like that next tier of like Herbert and Hurts and Jordan Love, and I'm like, okay, can you be better than those guys?
Yeah.
This year. And it's honestly, that's the question, because
yeah,
they tried to load up the offense around him by bringing in Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon, but I'm kind of meh on both those moves. Like honestly, if they're moves they made this offseason, I like adding Danielle Hunter more than those guys.
Yeah.
You should have Tank Dell back. Nico Collins is here for another season. Like you have the tools you need to take a step forward. But my question is like, how big is the step? And is it forward? Because like I said, progression's not always linear in all things. But I think this like just default answer of, yeah, the Texans are a Super Bowl contender this season. I need to see how far like is CJ Stroud, is he top 10? Is he top 8? Is he top 7? Is he top 6? Like,
well,
he needs to get up there because that Baltimore game showed us how far away from being an actual contender Houston really was last year.
I mean, if we're talking about if they're a Super Bowl contender this year, I mean, first I think we have to ask the question, do they have Patrick Mahomes? No? Okay, cool.
Not a Super Bowl contender.
Not
Answer
a Super
that
Bowl
question.
Contender. All right. Well, that's it for the show, guys.
But can they be the team that loses to Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship? That's the real Super Bowl for everybody else who isn't Patrick Mahomes. What is your biggest narrative for the AFC South this year?
Is this a one-team division? Can anyone else in this division make themselves relevant? We saw awesome flashes from Anthony Richardson before he got hurt last year. bright enough flashes that it's like anyone who was rooting for the Colts was chomping at the bit to get him back on the field because it is special stuff. He needs to be able to finish a game without getting hurt, but that's a different conversation. The Jags won the division the year before. I mean, there's a lot of people who look at what they have on their roster and say, like, this is a team that should be good. They should be expecting to make the playoffs. And they're just such a meh team. And I mean, I could go into a litany of reasons why I feel like that's the case, but it's like, this is a team that should be better than it has been. Like, put up or shut up. Like, are you gonna figure shit out this year and make yourself relevant? Um, the Titans, like, I don't think anyone's expecting them to be world beaters this year, but like, I think Titans fans were found them to be a much more fun and exciting team to watch the moment Will Levis stepped on the field. So, does he show enough this year to give that defense a chance to actually matter? Because when that defense gets cooking, yeah, that's not a fun team to play.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think there are cases to be made for all the other teams in this division,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely the way it looks from the odds perspective and from most analysts' perspective is that this is the Texans division
Yep.
and kind of nobody else matters here. But people forget that even though Anthony Richardson only played 4 games last year, the Colts were still in it. And it took the Texans beating the Colts like really late in the season to actually win this division. And
Yeah.
they only won it by a game because I think the Jags and the Colts finished with 9 wins last season. So it wasn't like the Texans ran away with it last year. And then they absolutely schmeckledorfed Cleveland. So I think people kind of forgot about everything that happened last year and just kind of looked at that playoff game and they're like, oh man, the Texans are legit. They're here to stay. So
Yeah.
we'll see how it plays out. But
And I don't even think that someone else needs to win the division. I just want to see, like, do the other teams in this division kind of like claw away at them and drag them back down into the muck just enough to make this interesting?
well, is it competitive like it was last year?
Yeah.
Right? Because this is a division that, like, since Peyton Manning left it, has a history of being pretty competitive. And the
Yeah.
winner, like, being in that 9 to 10 win range a lot of the seasons, just like it was last year. Like, they Texans won it. They went 10-7. They won it by 1 game over 2
Yeah.
other teams. So it's like right there. But let's talk about what our expectations are for these teams this season in our win ranges. Starting with the Houston Texans, this is the hardest division to do alphabetical order in. It's like the Big Ten, where it's like, I said this on a previous podcast, that if you put all the Big Ten teams, all 20 of them in alphabetical order, the first one is Illinois. I have 9 to 12 wins for the Houston Texans. I think this was a pretty popular win range for me this year with teams that I expect to be over 500, especially ones that I expect to be near the top of their division, where it's like, yeah, I expect you to be an over 500 team. I don't expect anybody to be like too great this season. I don't think I've had 13 in any of my win ranges so far except for the Lions. Yeah, that's right. I haven't had more than 12 for any win range except for the Lions. So it's pretty popular win range for me. Vegas has them at over under 9.5 this year. So kind of expecting them to finish right around where they were last year, 9-10 wins. My thing with the Texans is I think they are kind of in the same spot as the Lions, where there's a ton of preseason hype this year, and you're not going
Mhm.
to sneak up on anybody.
Yeah.
Like, you are the hunted now, you're not the hunter, but not trying to suck up to you here, but they're not as talented as the Lions are. Like, they're just
Yeah.
not as good as the Lions. So can you handle that as the Texans this season?
Through last season, they had actually like done a really good job of like, yeah, we're gonna add talent in like productive ways not spend resources on older talent that we don't need to spend resources on. And they kind of decided this offseason to kind of not follow that plan anymore, which like I feel like honestly it cuts away at like the dearth of the talent that you have. You're going for specific guys when you can kind of just keep doing what you're doing and you have more talent everywhere so that when someone goes down, you've just kind of got something there for that. That's really one of the most valuable things in the NFL because everyone goes down eventually.
Yeah.
Uh,
I love Nick Caserio, the GM for the Texans. I miss him
mhm.
every day. He was the Patriots director of college scouting for a while and was awesome. And our drafts completely fell off after he left, and the Texans draft all of a sudden went up. So kind of tells you something about that guy. I agreed with the strategy of like, hey, we have an awesome quarterback on a rookie deal. Let's go all in right now. I don't know if the guys that they went all in with are the guys that I would have liked to have had gone all in with. That is a hard sentence to say.
Diggs and Mixon, those whether or not you think they have fallen off the cliff yet or not, like they are at that edge.
Yeah.
Like they're at those ages.
Well,
I
didn't they trade for Diggs and then like do this massive payout thing to shorten his contract to like one season or two
yeah,
seasons or something?
yeah,
Super weird.
yeah,
They got him in the building and they instantly regretted it and they're like, okay, get this guy the
yeah,
fuck out of here.
yeah. So I have 9 to 11 for the Texans. I maybe I could see them getting to 12, but I just feel like the competition or the competitive way within which games are played in this division makes it hard for me to see them pulling away quite that much.
All right. Team two is the Indianapolis Colts. I have the Colts from 6 to 9, and their over under is 8.5. So Vegas is kind of saying right around 500. I think a lot of this to me falls on Anthony Richardson's health. Like we said, he only played 4 games last season and he didn't finish most of them because he was getting
Yeah.
knocked out of games with injuries. I also think there's a lot of hype around Anthony Richardson this year as like a fantasy quarterback. And,
Hmm.
people saw flashes from him last season and they're like, holy shit, this guy, he is awesome. And I don't disagree because I've been big on Richardson ever since he did that 360 no scope touchdown throw against Utah. And I text you immediately and I was like, this is my quarterback. I love this guy.
But
But
4 games is a very small sample size.
4 games, and in those 4 games, he only completed 59% of his passes and went 2-2. So I think like when Richardson was drafted, like in the pre-draft process, in the draft, and after the draft, I've been consistent and said that he is a project and
Yeah.
he needs work. And he didn't get a lot of it last year because he only played 4 games.
Yeah.
Now we're expecting him to come in for 17 games and be awesome. And I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility, but I think a much more realistic possibility is that he's up and down this season. And he probably has some fucking awesome games and puts up 40 plus fantasy points and is incredible. He probably also has some terrible games where he doesn't complete a lot of passes and he looks shitty trying to throw the ball. And I think we're going to see all the outcomes in between this year. So I think that like right around 500 is a much more realistic expectation for him. And that's if he stays healthy.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if he gets hurt, they have Joe Flacco as the backup quarterback.
Yeah.
I like Flacco. I just don't know if Flacco can do what he did last season in Cleveland and come in and be absolutely amazing again. So that combined with the fact their defense was 24th last year and doesn't look a whole lot better to me on paper, I'm a little bit cooler on them than I feel like a lot of people are right now.
I can't believe you're doubting an elite dragon quarterback
Well, if I
like
knew
Joe.
Flacco, was going to start all 17 games, I'd probably be higher.
I have 7 to 10, so I'm not far off from you.
Yeah, you're like one higher than me.
Even if Richardson plays 15 games, they can get 7 wins out of that. I think
Yep.
he's good enough for that. But man, if he clicks, like the shortcomings that we see with that roster, yeah, he can kind of cover a lot of that up.
Yeah, I just think to me, it's just going to take another year or so, just more live fire reps than most of 4 games before he really
Yeah,
starts clicking. Like, I think he's going to be awesome.
yeah,
This is going to be a controversial take. So here we go. Still think he's going to be the best quarterback in this division long term over CJ Stroud.
yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know that this is the year for him. Uh, Team 3, the aforementioned Jacksonville Jags. I have the Jags 7-10. Their over under is 8.5. I think this is the prove it year for Trevor Lawrence. In a way, it's a weird thing to
It's
say.
funny because he already got his bag.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. That's my first note. Is like it's funny to say it's a prove it year because he just got paid 5 years, $275 million. So no matter what happens this season, he is the Jaguars starting quarterback for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Like he's not going anywhere. He's already got his bag. But I think it's fair to ask at this point, after 3 seasons in the NFL, like based on what our expectations of him were before he got drafted, is he a bust? And I think that this season is really going to tell us whether or not he is, because they just every year since Urban Meyer left, they brought in like more and more stuff to try to help him out. Last year it was Ridley. That was underwhelming. He leaves. This year they spend a first round pick on Brian Thomas Jr., who I really like, out of LSU. And then they go and sign Gabe Davis. So what do we have to do to get the Trevor Lawrence that we thought we were going to get? We got you wide receivers. We drafted Travis Etienne. We've invested in the offensive line. We've brought in multiple coaches. Like, what is left besides it is time to be good? And I get that, like, looking at it right now, the Jags still probably don't have a legit number one with like Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, and BTJ being their guys. Although I think BTJ can be that guy in a couple years. But you've had like an embarrassment of riches and all sorts of weapons, and your team's brought in new guys for you every single season. And the results are still underwhelming. Like you're like a 9-10 win team every season. And the stats aren't great. It's definitely not what we expected out of the Golden Boy. So even though he got his bag, I think from like a public perception type of debate that this is like a prove it year for him. And if he has another like mediocre year and this team doesn't make the playoffs, I think Doug Peterson is probably the one that suffers the consequences because they did just give him his bag.
I mean, honestly, that might be the best thing for the future of this franchise.
Yeah. But like that's the next thing though. And it's like he's just starting to feel like that quarterback where it's always like the problem's never him. It's the coach. It's the receivers. It's the running backs. It's the blah, 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 blah.
And I preface this by saying that when he was coming out of college, I was definitely more critical of him than you were.
I'll give you credit that I think that out of everybody I listen to and everybody I know who talks football, I think that you were the hardest on him coming out of college.
Yeah.
I'll give you credit.
If you told me that a rookie quarterback came into the NFL and in their first 3 years, the only 2 coaches that they got to play for were Urban Meyer and Doug Peterson, and they sucked, I would be like, well, yeah, no shit. So all things can be true. Like, he hasn't been good, and he never takes the blame. And I think hey, like we also have to acknowledge, well, yeah, he hasn't played for a coach that any of us can acknowledge is any good.
Why? Let me ask you a question real quick. Why is Bobby Slowick not the head coach of the Jacksonville Jags? Why did the Jags not do what the Panthers did to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and look in their own division and say, and we didn't talk about this with the Texans, and shame on us that Bobby Slowick somehow did not get a head coaching job and he is back to run that offense again. If I was the Jags, I would have been like, I want that guy. But I guess, you would be on coach 3 for Trevor Lawrence in 4 seasons. And that brings up questions, but like they should have stolen him from the Texans if they could. Maybe they
Yeah,
couldn't. Maybe that's the answer. But
that I mean that should have been the play. But also like when your owner straight up just looks like a Disney villain, tell me that isn't what Jafar looks like in real life. But
I mean,
like
maybe Bobby Slowick just didn't want to coach in London 2 years from now.
yeah, but I could see ownership just doubling down on the coaching staff and not wanting to make another change.
Yeah. What was your win range for the Jags?
6-9. I just really don't see a Doug Peterson team getting to 10 wins.
So the last team in the division is the Tennessee Titans. I'm just gonna warn everybody. I'm like strangely high on the Titans. And I think part of it is just that so many people are not high on the Titans because Derrick Henry and Mike Vrabel are gone. And so it's kind of like a zag for me. And it's like one of those bets where like 85% of people are betting on one area. And I'm like, okay, just by pure virtue alone, I'm going the other way because it's never correct when like everybody agrees. I have 6 to 9 wins for the Titans. They're over under a 6.5. I know. I see the face that Matt just made. And it's just funny because like I almost don't even have a reason for it because all of my analysis says bad things about them. Where it's like, they get rid of Vrabel so that they can like sprint out as fast as they can and hire Brian Callahan this year, a coach that nobody else really wanted. They're just like, that's our guy. We want that guy so bad. But it's just starting to feel like the island of misfit toys to me, where the offense has Hopkins, Ridley, Treylon Burks is still there, Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, like all guys that I liked at some point. They added L'Jarius Sneed to the defense, who was an underrated, like massive, massive piece of the last 2 Chiefs championships. Especially last year, he was incredible in the playoffs. We talked about this over the weekend that every year there's a team that's like plus 300 odds or higher to make the playoffs that like makes it. Last year it was Tampa Bay. They were plus 400 and they somehow made the playoffs. And if I was betting on a team that was plus 300 or higher with playoff odds right now to make it, this is probably my pick because as much as the advanced stats say bad things about Will Levis, and as afraid of mayonnaise as Will Levis is,
It's milk, not mayo.
whatever, dairy products, he finds ways to win games. Just like somehow think about that Miami game where they're down by like 13 with 2 minutes left and all of a sudden they win it somehow.
Yeah.
He just finds ways to win games. And I like the pieces around him. I think the defense looks a little bit better. And God damn it, maybe Brian Callahan is just a really good coach and they saw something that everybody else didn't. I know I'm going to regret this, but 6 to 9.
I have them 6-9 as well.
Yes.
Uh,
Boom sauce.
no,
Welcome to the official podcast of the 2024 Tennessee Titans.
It's one of those things where it's like I don't know enough to know how much the coaching staff change is gonna affect the team. So I'm kind of just doing my best to not even factor that in. But like we know what we've seen that defense do in the past, I mean, you show me a quarterback with a rocket for an arm that like has no qualms about getting hit and just is like tough as nails and will keep getting up no matter how many times you try to break his leg. Like, yeah, that's a team that I am going to expect to win some games that they shouldn't. And if they can figure out how to build a team around him, maybe they can actually legitimately be good one day.
Mm-hmm.
But um yeah, I and if I was more comfortable with the L'Jarius Sneed situation, I might have even pushed it to 10. But I mean, the reason that it took so long for L'Jarius Sneed to get traded was because the medicals were so bad on him that like no one wanted to pay the price that they were asking for. So like who knows what they're actually going to get out of him this year? Uh, just from the medical standpoint. We know what he can do when he's healthy. It's just how much will he be on the field?
They also signed longtime friend of the podcast, Quandre Diggs, the other
Yeah.
day. So I thought we were going to be way off there. I thought that was going to be the pick where you looked at me like I was on drugs.
No,
Glad,
I've always liked the milkman.
glad we're on the same page. Uh, bold predictions for the AFC South. I don't really like to go negative on my boldy bolds, but I wanted to find a bold that says the Texans are going to regret trading for Stephon Diggs. And I was trying to figure out what the best way to do that is. I was like, do I just say the Texans are going to regret trading for Stephon Diggs? To just like, could that just be a bold? But I figured that wasn't bold enough. So my prediction is that Stephon Diggs is a wide receiver 5 in fantasy this year. He's being drafted as wide receiver 25 right now. And my prediction means that he will finish outside of the top 48 receivers in fantasy. I think Diggs is washed. I think the Bills are probably laughing to the bank that they got what they did to move on from him. He played with Josh Allen last year and fell off the side of a fucking cliff the second half of the season. He was horrible the second half of the season, playing with one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I think CJ Stroud's good. But you know who I think is better is Nico Collins. You know who I think is better than Stephon Diggs? Tank Dell. I think Stephon Diggs is wide receiver 3 in this offense. And that both of those guys, like my other option for this was that Tank Dell and Nico Collins are both going to triple crown Stephon Diggs and have more catches, yards, and touchdowns than him this season. But I think that they're going to regret this because Stephon Diggs is a diva, and I think it's going to cause drama. And I think that there's a reason that they've already shortened his contract, and we haven't even played a single game yet.
Yeah, that happened within like a week of trading for him.
Yeah.
Like it
So
was immediate. So like that was either something they were planning on doing when they did it, which is weird, or as soon as he got there, they knew it was a problem.
yeah, I mean, a portion of this is that I just think Stephon Diggs is washed, and just go back and look at like the first 8 games of last season and then the last 9, and tell me he's not washed.
So
But then
I think
also, I also think he's the 3rd best receiver on this team, and there's
I
just not as much opportunity for him.
I think too when you talk about the last 9 games he played last year, there's a legitimate question like, did he fall off a cliff or did he quit? And I don't think there's a good answer to that.
I was gonna say one's not better than the other,
Yeah.
especially now that he's in an offense where he's gonna get the ball less.
Yeah.
So that's my pick. Stephon Diggs outside of the top 48 receivers. I rank everything in terms of half point PPR because that's what I'm used to. What is your bold prediction for the
All
AFC
right.
South?
Mine's a little weird. It's a little fun. I was looking at this division
Will
and
Levis drinks a glass of milk in game.
I mean, does he need trauma mid-game? Looking at the quarterbacks in this division, I would say Stroud is probably like the least athletic out of the four of them. And Stroud is not like unathletic. He's not slow. He's not like super twitchy, but like still a pretty good athlete for a quarterback. Uh I'm going to say that the quarterbacks in this division combine for a total of 20 rushing touchdowns this year.
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's bold. And I felt like it's a possibility because if Anthony Richardson stays healthy, he can get half of that on his own. I mean, we could be talking like Cam Newton numbers for him. So
I'm really enjoying our work on the Boldy Bolts this year because, like, I don't know, just looking at like the last couple of years versus this year, I feel like we've been so much more creative this
yeah.
year and like thinking outside the box, but still keeping it like really bold. I'm proud of us because we're both doing it. Like we have some
Yeah.
good. We'll review them in week one for anybody that missed any of the preview pods. But like we have some
Mhm.
really solid, like fun bolds this year. Where the last couple of years, it's like this record's going to be broken. This record's going to be broken. And this year, it's like really fun things. Like the Steelers are going to throw for less yards this
Yeah.
season than last year.
Well, we started doing Boldy Bolds like pretty much at the beginning of this podcast. So I think there was a point where it might have gotten kind of stale for us, right? And we've kind of might have needed that break from football in order to kind of come back with some new enthusiasm for it.
I just really
Uh
appreciate our evolution of
yeah,
Boldy Bolds. You're not going to get Boldy Bolds like you get on this podcast this year. That's for
you're
damn
really
sure.
not.
It just raises the bar for next week. But I'm just going to let everybody know the NFC West preview podcast is going to drop on August 27th, which is next Tuesday. And I got a banger. I have a banger for the NFC West. I'm excited about it. All right, picks to win the division. As much as we kind of talked up some of these other teams and expect them to be maybe a little bit better than other people do, I'm still going with the Houston Texans. I still think they're the most complete team in this division. Even if they hadn't brought in like Diggs and Mixon, I would still look at like adding Danielle Hunter and like another year of Derek Stingley, and you got Collins and Tank Dell and these other guys, and I would still pick them. So I'm going Texans.
I'm gonna go Texans as well. I really want to go Colts.
I could tell that
I want to.
just looking at you on this Zoom screen, I could tell that you
Yeah,
wanted to go somewhere else.
I want to go Colts, especially with the conversation that we had over the weekend about the amount of teams that turn over in the playoffs every year.
Mm-hmm.
Like if that's gonna happen in this division, I think that's the team that does it. I'm gonna stand pat and then hate it in December when the Colts win the division. So
When Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud are both up for the MVP and they're playing each other late in the season for control of this division, you're going to be miserable.
if that is happening, we need to arrange to watch that game together. Because,
live stream the game on the podcast.
God, yeah, that is premium content.
Mm. But that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Gmail, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. Send us your bold predictions for the upcoming NFL season. We would love to hear yours and compare them to ours, but yours better be as creative As hard as
our boldy bolds.
Yeah, let's do it. You can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. This podcast is dropping Friday, August 23rd. Matt and I will be back Tuesday, August 27th with our preview of the NFC West. And then our final division preview. The AFC West is going to drop Friday, August 30th. And you know what that means is that after that, we are on to week 1 of the NFL season, where Matt and I will make our remaining wildcard picks, pick all the award winners, start giving you guys some gambling picks for the first Thursday night football game, which is Ravens at Chiefs, and then one pick for the weekend. And just, I'm so excited to watch football. I want to watch football so bad.
It'll be so nice.
I'm probably going to watch Florida State and Georgia Tech just to watch real football that matters, even though Florida State's going to kill them. But all right, my friend, I will see you soon.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Bye, Mom.
Bye, Robin.